So, we all know the name Jeffrey Epstein. We know the horrific crimes he was convicted of. But today, we're going to peel back a layer and look at something else, a shadow narrative that's been around for years. We're investigating the theory that Epstein was more than just a disgraced financier, that he was, in fact, an intelligence asset. And that's really the core question we're tackling here, and it's a stark one. Was Jeffrey Epstein simply a monster who used his incredible wealth and connections to abuse people? Or was there something else going on? Was he operating as something else entirely? An asset working in the shadows for a foreign government? All right, let's get into it. The public story, we all know it, right? A super wealthy financier with a Rolodex full of powerful friends, convicted of sex trafficking underage girls. His death in a New York jail cell back in 2019 was officially ruled a suicide, but for a lot of people, that just threw more fuel on the fire and deepened the mystery of who this guy really was. I mean, just look at the money. At the time of his death, his fortune was valued at over $636 million. But where did all that cash come from? The exact origins of his immense wealth have always been incredibly murky, which has led to all sorts of speculation about what was really going on behind the scenes. You know, to really get to the bottom of this spy theory, you can't just look at Epstein. You have to look at his closest partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. And even more specifically, you have to look at her father, the infamous British media tycoon Robert Maxwell. His life story is really the blueprint for a lot of these intelligence claims. The idea that Robert Maxwell himself was a spy isn't new, and it's built on some pretty stunning circumstantial evidence. For years, there were allegations that he worked for Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency. But it's what happened after his mysterious death at sea in 1991 that really raises eyebrows. He was given a funeral in Israel that was basically a state funeral. He was buried on the sacred Mount of Olives. The prime minister gave his eulogy, and the guest list was a who's who of Israeli intelligence chiefs. That just doesn't happen for a regular businessman. Okay, so the theory goes that this intelligence connection didn't just disappear when Robert Maxwell died. The main threat that seems to tie Jeffrey Epstein directly to Israeli intelligence is his incredibly close, well-documented relationship with one of the most powerful figures in modern Israeli history. And that figure was Ehud Barak. We're talking about a former prime minister, a former defense minister, and the former head of the entire Israeli army. And according to multiple sources, he was one of Epstein's absolute closest associates for years. So just how close are we talking? Well, according to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Barak visited Epstein's different properties at least 36 times between 2013 and 2017. And you gotta remember, this wasn't before Epstein was known as a criminal. This was long after his 2008 conviction as a sex offender was public knowledge. And their connection, it wasn't just social. You gotta follow the money. Back in 2004, the Wexner Foundation paid Ehud Barak over $2 million for what they called a research program. And guess who was a trustee of that foundation at the exact same time? Yep, Jeffrey Epstein. It paints a pretty clear picture of how intertwined their financial worlds were. But it seems like Epstein's role was way bigger than just being a friend with a checkbook. Recently hacked emails from Ehud Barak himself suggest that Epstein was acting as a kind of geopolitical fixer. According to these emails, Epstein was helping Barak broker security deals between Israel and Mongolia, sell Israeli spy tech to the Ivory Coast, and even set up a secret back-channeled Russia during the Syrian civil war. He was even, allegedly, setting up meetings for Barak with top American spies, like the director of the CIA, Leon Panetta. So, if we entertain this idea, if Epstein was an intelligence asset, what was his actual job? What was the method to his madness? Well, this leads us to the most disturbing and explosive part of the entire theory. The allegation that his sex trafficking ring was actually a weapon. The tactic is known as a honey trap. It's a classic intelligence move straight out of a spy movie. You use sex or romance to compromise a target, to get them on tape doing something illegal or embarrassing, which then makes them incredibly vulnerable to blackmail. And this isn't just a fan theory from the internet. It was laid out pretty bluntly by a man named Ari Ben Menashe, who claims he's a former Mossad officer. In his book, he makes the absolutely explosive claim you see on the screen. He alleges that Epstein's crimes were not just for his own sick pleasure. The core of his allegation is that Epstein was secretly recording these horrific acts to blackmail powerful people, all in service of Israeli interests. And here is the kicker, the detail that ties it all back together. Ben Menashe, the guy making this insane claim about Epstein's honey trap operation, also claims that he was the official intelligence handler for Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell. It brings the whole story full circle.
Now, it is really, really important to say there is zero on-the-record confirmation of any of this from any official government source. But there's a trail of really weird facts and unanswered questions that just keeps the speculation alive.
And maybe the most famous piece of that puzzle is the statement allegedly made by Alexander Acosta. He was the U.S. attorney who gave Epstein that ridiculously lenient plea deal back in 2008. When he was later asked why he went so easy on him, he reportedly told the Trump transition team, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." That suggests a kind of protection that goes way beyond what money can buy. Inside intelligence circles, there's apparently a term that's been used to describe Epstein's unique skill set, a hyperfixer. It's a term for someone who can just effortlessly move between completely different worlds, politics, finance, science, royalty, and connect powerful people and networks that would never otherwise meet.
And then there's the hard data, stuff you can't just explain away easily, like the flight logs from his private jet. Check out this one trip from November 2016. On the 7th, his jet leaves Paris and flies toward the Middle East. It hangs a right over Jordan, and then its transponder signal just vanishes near the Saudi border. Poof. 2 days later, it pops back up on the grid over the Sinai Peninsula, flying back to Paris. Aviation experts looked at this and said it was a highly unusual flight path, one that his plane never repeated.
So, at the end of the day, the idea of Jeffrey Epstein the spy is still just that, an unconfirmed theory. But that web of connections to high-level intelligence, the bizarre questions about his plea deal and his death, and just the sheer scale of his global network, it's all undeniable. And it leaves us with one final, pretty chilling question. If any part of this theory is true, who exactly was being compromised, and for what purpose? That's a question that, for now, remains completely unanswered.